Welcome everyone. Excited to see everyone's faces. As I always say at the beginning of these meetings, it's always great to continue to connect with people, even though everything that's been going on. It's still great to see everyone every week, and hopefully we provide you with some value today. Today we have Jeff Walston, who's a good friend of mine, and he has been in the commercial construction business for some time now, and hopefully he can provide you guys with some insights on everything related to the commercial construction process. I've been in the business for just over a year now, and I can tell you that it's a very in-depth process, and I still am nowhere near an expert. And so I think that Jeff will help illuminate that for us today. Generally speaking, Jeff, when we start these meetings, we just like to get to know a little bit about the other person. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into commercial construction, I think that'd be great.
Sure. So hello, everyone. Jeff Walston, Premise Construction. So I started actually in the residential sector of family business growing up through the years, which we dabbled in commercial construction off and on. And what intrigued me about that was just the way that commercial construction's so precise and set up. Because I mean, you're looking for precision, and you have to also look out for the health and safety of the general public. So I like that aspect of it. So that kind of brought me over to that, which led me working internationally for a commercial firm, building out dental labs, Central and South America, from working here in Louisville and Kentucky and in Southern Indiana, doing just renovations and building and construction and commercial sector. So that brought me along from working internationally. And I got 2 kids, so that kind of brought me back home when they are starting to get old enough and asking where I was. So I started Premise Construction to kind of help with the balance of work and life and still do what I love to do. So
that's awesome. I didn't realize you had worked internationally to create some of those dental labs. That's pretty awesome. I lived in, I think I told you, I lived in Santiago, Chile for 4 months when I was did an exchange there when I was in college. So
yeah,
big fan.
Yeah, I built a lab down in Santiago. It's a beautiful city, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, the smog gets really bad in the wintertime, which would be the summertime there since it's like inverted.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful city. I still have some friends there.
It's amazing for someone like me going down there, architect or anything. It's just their subway system, how they built a city on top of a city is just amazing, especially in consideration like once a week they have what, 2, 3, 4 earthquakes all the time. And they built this massive city on top of a subway. It's like the engineering there is just wow. I was in awe. I was impressed when I went there. So.
Yeah, when I was living there, we had multiple earthquakes, and people are just like, I mean, they're not big, but you feel the shake, and you're like, it was just an earthquake. Don't worry about it. It's funny.
Yeah. I actually had a funny story. Is so I can speak Spanish enough to get by, and I bought this new drink that everyone said to try, and I was actually having a business meeting when an earthquake happened, and I just took a drink of this particular drink, and I'm looking down like, oh my goodness, what is in this drink? But I didn't realize it was actually an earthquake that was happening during the whole business meeting. So, yeah.
Well, that's cool to know that. And but as far as your commercial experience, could you kind of walk through maybe a typical commercial construction project? And I say typical with air quotes because obviously there's not every construction project is going to be different. But maybe if you can walk through one that you've done in the past and kind of explain how you analyzed it and how you kind of went through the process to fulfill it to completion.
Sure. So a typical one, most recent one was a commercial renovation for us. So what we normally do is kind of, if they don't already have blueprints and a design laid out, we'll walk through them, this original space and kind of walk through a design to lay out blueprints and everything. And once we do that, we'll get started creating the blueprints, then call the local city to make sure there's not any new regulations that's popped up in that particular part of whatever city that we're in. Once we do that, in the blueprints, while we create them, we also got to follow like the National Fire Protection Agency code regulations, ADA as well. And then you also have their commercial mechanical codes and regulations that are different from residential that you have to follow. And if it's a food-based business, you're actually, you're gonna be dealing with the health and safety department at that point as well. So all those aspects that we have to get started, which could require a month, maybe two, if you're in a food-based business, as you know, Raphael, and a particular one that you went into, a bakery. I mean, you're at the state level then, so you're sitting around waiting once you to get all your ducks in a row, particularly. Once all that happens, then we get to start on what I'd like to call smart demolition. This is taken into the aspect of the consideration of the project at hand. So like you're going to account for a wall going somewhere. You don't necessarily have to take out the entire ceiling or ductwork system. So it's a lot of planning ahead, but if you do the smart demolition, it's going to save dollars and actually time. So once that starts, during that time, we'll pre-order all finishes and be working with the client of what they want as far as paint colors, flooring, base, even new ceiling looks and design at that part. And then we will get started on the rebuild of the space, calling the mechanical contractors, get them in. And once that's done, we will get going on the rough inspections and do a walkthrough with all the inspectors, make sure everything's going according to the blueprints. And once we do that, of course, along the way, we're giving updates to the business owner or leasing agent or investor, whoever that we're dealing with, and all parties in consideration of the project. So once we did that, I mean, after we pass those inspections, it's time to do drywall and build the space out to where you can start seeing the finished product with all the finishes and such. And then, of course, the last inspections, which we'll have to get all the inspectors in for the fire suppression system and emergency exits, and make sure the ADA is in compliance, and then all the mechanical and structural inspections to finalize the project. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a super in-depth process, and this is something that I'm learning more and more as I'm starting to be in the business longer. But and this kind of leads into the next question, which is what are some of the common pitfalls you see business owners make when they undertake building out a space? So this applies to both business owners who are looking to lease a space and they want to build out the property, or they just buy a building and now they want to make it into their own functional space for their business.
I would say not being properly informed about the commercial building codes and regulations. Commercial is not like residential, where, I mean, you're dealing with the health and safety of the general public. So I think that's the main pitfall, that people don't realize how in depth that you must go in order to keep the public safety. For example, is that bakery deal that we were looking into. I mean, we just set up the plumber and get plans and designs and sent off to the state and health department, and that takes weeks to a month. I mean, to get that properly set up and designed, and I mean, because you're dealing with sinks and grease traps and pulling blueprints all at the state level. So it's not just the city. I mean, and national level as well. And on that particular project, a pitfall that was overlooked is just not the knowledge of the plumbing. So for instance, she would have to add another restroom and enlarge the current one to meet the ADA compliance, because she was going to have a small sit-in space for people to come in and eat it. So I think that would be the most common, is the knowledge. So I would say on this particular one, just get someone who's a general contractor in commercial construction, particularly that has experience in whatever business that you have, if it's retail to restaurants to industrial, they have that experience and stuff like that. That's who you need to have in your corner to help with the pitfalls that a business owner could face. So.
Definitely. And I'll even add to that a little bit. And this may not necessarily be a pitfall, but it's an expectation. Like a lot of people think since this is they kind of attach what happens in a residential environment to a commercial environment. So number one is the time it takes, and then like you were mentioning, you have to go through the state, and there's various other different moving parts that are in place that you necessarily don't have in the residential setting, which elongates how long it takes to get something done, and then also the price. I feel like that's something
Absolutely.
that I get a lot of is like the sticker shock.
Yeah.
That stuff, and I don't know if you've had multiple experiences with that.
Yeah, in commercial construction, you can't get your aunt and uncle and cousin who knows how to do construction to come in and do these projects. That cuts all them out. So you're dealing with commercial pricing in that aspect, and that all falls in, it all falls in with the general public. I mean, the pricing is what it is to keep everyone safe, and that's what people need to realize. It's not that these companies are going out there and trying to gouge people with pricing. It's no, we need this particular dollar amount in order to keep everyone safe. Even the construction workers and like my employees, even during that process, it takes, I mean, you're wearing hard hats and safety goggles and PPE. I mean, that jacks up a sticker price as well. I mean, you have to protect everyone during the whole process and even after you leave.
So with this group, we tailor this group to both business owners and investors, because those are the people who really deal in the commercial space. So
Sure.
Similar to the question we had before, what are some of the common pitfalls you see investors make? Because they're going to have slightly different pitfalls than a business owner who's maybe using that space for a functional use for their building or for their business operations.
Sure. The one thing that I've experienced is they didn't get the right people to invest in that particular part of the city. So within a city, you might have, for instance, here in Louisville, Kentucky, we have Jeffersontown. So those particular city regulations are slightly different than the rest of the city. You have to go through their building codes and regulations. So, and then it goes from the city could be, the regulations could be what the exterior are for proper signage. That could cause you, if you're putting a McDonald's on the corner, maybe they don't want the sign to be high enough that's typical for McDonald's or such. You may not be able to get acceptance for proper parking. Or you couldn't add the parking because you wouldn't be able to control the storm water runoff. All that is parts of the investors when they're investing in, and that's something particularly in both new construction and if they're investing in building that's already there to renovate. Or another one would be historic property. That's a big one. I mean, now you're getting into the historic society of each city. So yeah, I mean, and also another pitfall is each year, if an investor is investing, and if they're planning on investing next year, the codes and regulations might have changed. I mean, international codes are changing all the time. Whether the state or city adopts them, that's something that you need to know, and it goes back to the knowledge of who you have around you and part of your team, whatever general contracting construction company that you actually have. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think that also lends itself to the fact that if you're going to buy something that requires some sort of construction component, you should get involved with a commercial general contractor early. And hopefully you can even have them with you as you go through the process of trying to buy the property, because they're going to be able to see some of those pitfalls. And because if you were to buy that property and all of a sudden your intended use is not functional for that space, or there's other pitfalls that you've fallen into that now just don't make the deal profitable, I mean, that could really hurt you. So I think if anything, getting someone involved early in the process and having constant communication with them to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, I think that's crucial.
Absolutely. Another point that while you were saying that was you get them early, because you might be building an office building, but you don't know if you can go over 1, 2, or 3 stories in that particular part of the city or whatnot because they don't want to change the skyline. So
or parking requirements.
exactly.
You buy a building, and all of a sudden there's not enough parking, and you're like, oh no one wants to lease the space because there's not enough parking, and you can't expand the parking because you don't have enough land. So I mean, there's a lot of parts you got to consider, and that's why I think it is really important to include a commercial contractor in the buying process, in particular if you're looking to purchase something that's going to require some sort of renovation.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So as far as estimating costs, I know this is something that I've gotten a lot of questions on, and I'm sure you get this question all the time. Is there a way for people to kind of have an idea of what, just by looking at a space, what some things may cost as far as on the commercial construction side?
That goes back to hiring a knowledgeable and experienced general contractor in that particular project. They're going to know from prior years of their construction kind of roundabout pricing, whether or not, if you're trying to estimate, I mean, of course, that's all guesswork. I would say hire 3 general contractors. Do not accept the lowest bid. Compare the bids, make sure nothing's overlooked. If something's overlooked, ask that contractor the question, like what's going on here? Why is this overlooked? Other people are adding that, or give them a chance. Because they may have overlooked something, and fair enough. And check for what projects they've done. Kind of look and see, have they done this particular project in the past? Are they capable of doing my project? Are they experienced in it? Maybe they have only done one. And then another thing is, don't forget all the safety costs again. Job site fencing, your PPE that I'm sure a lot more people are getting familiar with the pandemic here. And even in a particular part of a project, you might have to have nightly security just to protect material and everything like that. So, I mean, all that goes back to the knowledge and hiring the appropriate general contractor, and even commercial real estate agent. If you're looking for land and building and stuff like that, that they have knowledge in that as well. So it all falls back to that would be my best tip. If you're trying to do that yourself, I would say that's pretty hard. It takes years of experience to be able to walk through something and tell you exactly what that's going to cost. If you're trying to take that on by yourself, you're going to wind up losing a lot of money in the back end for sure.
Sure. And I'll even echo that sentiment in that getting multiple bids, I think, is important, like you were saying, and vetting each commercial contractor to make sure that they have the track record. And not only that, but you could contract a commercial contractor that's very large and has a lot of overhead, and that may also be factored into their price. So it's not always necessarily the greatest idea to go with the most established and largest commercial contractor you can find, because they bake in some of those overhead costs, whether that's the office that they have to pay every month, or the employees that they have. There's a lot of moving parts in some of those larger organizations. So if you can find someone who's experienced, does a good job, and they're well compensated they're fairly compensated for their time and their knowledge, I think that's your best bet. And I think that's kind of in that middle range. If you get 3 bids, it's probably that middle guy most likely is going to be the person that can provide you with the most value for what you're looking for. But yeah, I mean, and so now that we've kind of talked about some of the main ideas of the commercial construction process, what are some of the things that a business owner or investor can do to help streamline that process? So similar to residential real estate, when you undertake a construction project, there inevitably are going to be delays. There's certain things that are going to happen throughout the timeline that may or may not go as planned. And it's always safe to assume that that's going to happen because you don't want to be caught off guard if that were to happen and you weren't planning for it. So I guess my question is, what are a few things that you think business owners and investors can do to help streamline the process to make sure that they stay on time and hopefully on budget with their project?
I mean, it falls back to vetting the general contractor, feeling comfortable with them, seeing what projects they had and what they've done, seeing if you know anyone that they've done projects for, how did that go? Did it go well? Did it stay under budget? Was there any unforeseen things? And ask your general contractor for a project calendar to see the timelines, see what's going on, see what happens, and set up interval weekly to bi-weekly walkthroughs of the job site. Take the GC and project manager and job supervisor to walk through with you, ask them questions, see what's going on. A good general contracting company is going to do that for you. That's what they should do. I think that's required for everyone to do that. And if you're doing that, anything that pops up should be caught. You should be aware of, if you're a business owner or investor, immediately. This is going to change the timeline, or this is what we can do to keep it on the same timeline. It might cost a few extra dollars, but let's do this and try this. And it goes back again, I'll keep saying it's a knowledgeable and experienced general contractor. And if you can find those that you feel comfortable with, your project shouldn't have too many issues. And even if they are, what's better to say is like, hey, we had this issue, but don't worry, it's taken care of, and we're staying on budget, and the timeline hasn't changed. For me as a business owner, and I love to hear that, so that their project is done on time and within budget. So.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that and that's kind of been the common vein is communication, and not just letting someone take the reins and let them figure it out for themselves. It's a team effort. It's you and the general contractor working together to make sure the project's brought to completion. And if something is out of the ordinary, just speak up and talk with your general contractor. If you've properly vetted them and they're a good professional, they should have no problem answering any questions you have. And I think that's something that Jeff kind of talked about and kind of alluded to. And I think that's an important idea there. So I guess that's the main questions I had as far as the preset questions. So if any of you guys have any particular questions you'd like to ask, feel free to type them in the comment box. I'll be looking both here on Zoom and on Facebook, and then we'll ask Jeff these questions. I guess I have one question for myself, sure, because I have another additional one. As far as the estimation process for the commercial construction projects, do you encourage people to do like a best case scenario, worst case scenario, just to kind of factor in some wiggle room?
Yeah, I would say is, even at the most knowledgeable and experienced general contractor, if they put a set price in there, you can almost expect that it's going to be variable. It's fluid, because you don't know, especially if you're doing a renovation, that's going to be hard pressed. Even a new construction, within a foundation, they might think that there's just pure dirt there, and they get into limestone and stuff, and now you're trying to dig through rock to set foundations. It's something that it's sight unseen, and that's something that should be discussed and say, hey, this is the number that we're going to shoot for and stay on budget. But we can't see through walls, and we can't see through earth. So, and if we could, I guess we would have set prices, not a problem. But for the most part, they'll be able to stick with it. But there's always something. There's always something on one project. Even for me, there's always something you get into, and something comes up, or do this or do that. It's just open communication, speak with each other, and see what you can work through. There might be something that you don't necessarily need on that particular project. If something comes up, that you can still stay on budget and with that on the time frame, on the same timeline. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I'll say from a brokerage side, if you're looking to buy a building that needs construction, generally speaking, when you have the worst case scenario, best case scenario, it helps from a funding perspective too, because banks obviously are cautious by nature. So if you can provide them with an outlook and say, look, this is the best case scenario, this is the worst case scenario, and then show them how you handle each scenario, then that obviously helps from the funding side. And then you also bake in some extra potential costs with the commercial construction side of things. And I mean, that makes sure that you're not overshooting your budget, and then all of a sudden the returns just don't make sense, whether you're a business owner or an investor. So
Really, I agree. That for sure.
nice. Okay. So does anyone have any questions as far as the commercial construction project is concerned? I'm checking here on Facebook as well. So we got about 4 people on Facebook. So hello to everyone watching on Facebook. I guess let me pose a question to you, Jeff. What
Sure.
do you wish? I guess maybe name a few things that you wish people to provide some insight on what you wish people knew about the commercial construction project that would kind of help, I guess, maximize the value they receive from the interaction.
To maximum expectations, that's a big one. If I think before, even when you get the idea of buying, building, go ahead and start talking to contractors. I mean, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, I'm thinking about a project. What are some tips or tricks or something that I may overlook or not? I mean, to have that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of doing that right now with one of, I'm looking at a building to purchase potentially, and I called up Jeff and I was like, hey, you want to come check this out with me? And so we would just walk through the building and just kind of gave me an idea of what I could expect. Obviously, it's very rough figures because we don't know yet, but that gave me a solid foundation to kind of now project what do the financial analysis on it to see if I can get things done from an investment standpoint. And that could be the same for a business owner. If you're looking to purchase a building or do a build out or something, getting a contractor involved and walking through the space can kind of give you an idea of what you can expect. And maybe that gives you some leverage so that if, let's say, you're building out a retail space and it's going to cost $50,000 to do the commercial construction, maybe that gives you some leverage to then go maybe to the landlord or the owner and say, hey, look, this is how much this is going to cost. I'd like to either get a credit or whatever else when I'm looking to purchase or renovate if it's a lease, then you could get maybe a credit from the owner known as a tenant improvement allowance in order to build out the space. So. Okay.
Rafa, Jeff, I'm going to have to jump off here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Definitely.
Got another meeting.
No worries.
All right.
Yeah. Good seeing you, Harold.
Thanks,
Okay.
Harold.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like there's too many more questions. So I guess what I'll do is really thank you for your time, Jeff. I think this is great. And thank you to everyone on Facebook as well. Thanks for tuning in. We will be sharing this on Facebook and YouTube. So you'll have this available to rewatch at a later date, and just always excited to see you guys and provide some value. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me, Raphael. Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.